At 73,000 tons, the IJN Musashi was the biggest battleship ever built. But why did this seemingly invincible monster fail so badly within hours? In the autumn of 1944, American forces closed in on the Philippines, threatening to sever the supply arteries of the Japanese Empire. Japan's top military leaders rolled the dice on a last-ditch plan called Operation Sho-1. The goal was simple but incredibly risky: draw the American carriers away from the invasion beaches so that Japanese warships could move in and tear up the vulnerable transport ships. Taking the lead in this desperate mission was the Musashi. Alongside its near-identical sister ship, the Yamato, it was the heaviest and most heavily armed battleship ever built by any nation. However, American carrier groups already commanded the theater with superior air power and radar-guided efficiency. The environment was no longer dictated by heavy naval guns, but by aircraft that could strike from beyond the horizon. In the late 1930s, the Imperial Japanese Navy commenced work on the massive vessel in a restricted shipyard in Nagasaki. To keep the project hidden from prying eyes, workers erected massive screens and hung enormous tarpaulins over the slipway. This massive construction shield hid the project from local observers and passing vessels. The secrecy was so highly effective that the United States consulate, located directly across the bay, remained completely unaware of the industrial behemoth taking shape just a few hundred yards away. Building a 73,000-ton frame demanded significant shipyard upgrades before the keel could even be laid down. The local dry dock in Nagasaki was far too small and shallow to support the sheer size and displacement of the hull, forcing engineers to deepen the basin and reinforce the surrounding structures. Specialized heavy machinery and large gantry cranes were brought in to lift the heavy steel plates into place. The workforce labored day and night under the tarpaulins, welding together an unyielding shield of steel. The construction was a massive drain on the limited resources of the empire. Every single measurement on the Musashi defied normal logic. The vessel measured a staggering 263 meters from bow to stern, with a massive beam of 39 meters. Engineers pushed materials and power systems to the absolute limit to ensure the ship could survive the heaviest possible combat. The main belt of armor reached a massive 410 millimeters in thickness, designed to stop the largest naval shells of the era. Her main armament featured 9 460mm guns housed in 3 rotating turrets. These were the largest guns ever mounted on a surface warship, capable of firing a massive 1.5-ton shell nearly 40 kilometers across the open ocean. To push this immense steel fortress through the water, the machinery spaces held 4 massive steam turbines. Together, they produced 150,000 shaft horsepower, allowing the giant to reach speeds of 27 knots despite her incredible size. The largest warship ever built sat in the calm blue waters of Truk Lagoon, waiting for a decisive battle that never seemed to come. Commissioned during the summer of 1942, the Musashi entered the conflict just as the strategic situation turned against the empire. Instead of engaging the enemy fleet in open combat, the ship spent most of its early operational life far from the front lines. As the American fleet advanced, the giant finally moved out, heading straight into the teeth of the U.S. Navy's carrier aircraft. By late October 1944, the long wait finally came to a screeching halt when American forces launched a massive invasion on the island of Leyte. Desperate to stop the landings, the Japanese military ordered the Musashi to steam directly into the Sibuyan Sea as part of their main strike force. As the ship carved through the calm blue water, her massive shape projected pure power and intimidation. From far away, that towering control tower and those gigantic gun barrels made her look like a floating fortress that could brush off anything the Americans threw her way. But out here in the open ocean, There was nowhere to hide, no friendly air cover, and no islands to shield the ship. In reality, the giant had walked right into a massive ambush, miles away from any friendly support. The stage was set for a brutal clash between the biggest battleship ever put in the water and the sheer might of American air power. Everything changed in an instant as the first wave of American dive bombers and torpedo planes tore through the cloud cover. The air was filled with the deafening roar of radial engines and the sharp, almost rhythmic thud of heavy ordnance that was dropping from the sky. The crew scrambled to their action stations, their hearts pounding against their ribs as the ship's massive secondary and anti-aircraft batteries opened up with a deafening roar. Every single gun barrel pointed upward, trying to create a wall of fire in the path of the diving planes. The experience was absolutely visceral and terrifying. Empty brass shell casings piled up around the gunner platforms, slick with sweat and the harsh chemical smell of cordite. Then came the heavy ordnance. Before the crew could even catch a breath, the first torpedoes smashed right into the port side. The blast from the underwater hit slammed into the ship, tearing through the heavy outer armor. Tons of cold seawater rushed into the void, and the ship groaned under the massive pressure of the ocean. The crew realized that the armor would not protect them from the relentless aerial assault. Men worked in the dark, breathing thick black smoke and hearing the metal scream as the ship slowly began to list. Below decks, the situation turned into a desperate, chaotic struggle for survival. The heat inside the lower compartments became unbearable as the hull plates took hit after hit from above. Water rushed through the torn bulkheads, and the agonizing screech of tortured metal echoed through the corridors as the ship began to list heavily to port. Men fought to operate the manual valves and counterflood the starboard compartments, but the scale of the damage was too great. The deck plates grew slick with oil, seawater, and blood as the medical teams struggled to treat the wounded in the dark. It was a gritty, brutal, and horrifying reality for the young men trapped deep within the heart of the behemoth. Every attempt to correct the list failed, and the ship slowly lost power, becoming a sitting duck in the water. Over 1,000 men went down with the greatest battleship ever built, proving that size alone cannot win modern wars. By mid-afternoon, the giant had taken multiple torpedoes and bombs, leaving the engine rooms completely flooded and the steering gear jammed. The commanding officer gave the order to abandon ship, but for most of the crew, it was already too late. The ship rolled heavily onto its port side, exposing the massive red belly of the hull to the open sky, before slipping beneath the dark waters of the Sibuyan Sea. Over 1,000 sailors and officers sank with the great Titan, taking the ultimate symbol of imperial power down to the ocean floor. The disaster in the Sibuyan Sea marked the absolute end of the battleship era in the Pacific theater. It demonstrated clearly that thick steel armor and large guns could not protect a ship from the skies. The future belonged to the speed and flexibility of mobile carrier aviation. The Musashi became an underwater graveyard, a permanent reminder of how traditional doctrines failed in the modern age of warfare.